Who should fight and who not? A controversial topic of Ukrainian shielded reserve of men that would be otherwise drafted, explained tonight. Another topic, US lawmakers call for Biden to allow Poland to down Russian missiles over Ukraine. That is another topic to discuss. And a blitz interview with the great expert, a cherry on the top, Serhiy Somleny tonight. Good afternoon. These topics in more detail in a daily episode with me, Henry Keane, and Native English, doing our best to bring the hard truth in easy terms, as usual for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. Companies in Ukraine that were expecting to be able to reserve their employees to shield them from military draft might not be able to do so starting mid-November. Critical enterprise status allowed certain businesses to keep some employees off the military service. Why? Asked many, and who's to decide who's critical and who's not? The official Kiev said over the last week that it is currently in an audit process to find out which businesses qualify for that critical enterprise status and which are not. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine has allowed some men of conscription age to be spared from conscription as a way of keeping strategic sectors, including the defense industry, afloat and to curb the toll Russia's war has taken on the economy. But as the war extends into its third year, Ukraine is struggling to mobilize enough soldiers to compensate for troop casualties and the need to rotate soldiers who haven't been fighting for almost 3 years in a row by now. It is a thorny issue indeed, with some feeling it is unfair that others are not drafted and don't have to serve depending on their profession. It has also led to abuse of the system, as around 1.5 million people in Ukraine were spared from military service in mid-August. President Volodymyr Zelensky, of course, was quite unhappy with that issue and how high that figure is, as well as the fact that the number almost doubled over a couple of months as per high-ranking official in the presidential office. And presidential dissatisfaction was exactly that caused the audit.
The reason for the audit is the abnormal increase in the number of critical enterprises and the number of reserved employees. This is done in the interest of strengthening the country's defense capability and preventing abuses. The Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine.
But what about those who are indeed quite critical for the economy to run and who indeed should avoid the draft? Like those working in the defense industry of Ukraine, for example. Well, the Ukrainian government puts it clear and says loud, employees in strategically important sectors of the economy who received an exemption from military service before May 31st, 2024 will be able to extend that status. Two United States lawmakers have made a bipartisan appeal to President Joe Biden to allow Poland to shoot down Russian missiles over the skies of Ukraine and Poland, of course, the Hill media reported. Republican Joe Wilson and Stevie Cohen, the chair and ranking member, respectively, of the U.S. Helsinki Commission, made the call in a letter seen by the news outlet.
Despite Russia's continued escalation through hybrid warfare, airspace violations, attacks on critical infrastructure and efforts to destabilize democratic institutions, we have hesitated to confront these threats decisively. We are allowing Russia to wage a war against the alliance with minimal consequences. From a joint appeal of U.S. Helsinki Commission Chair Joe Wilson and Commission's ranking member state Steve Cohen.
It was initially Poland's request, by the way, and in this context, American lawmakers say that such Poland's request to intercept and neutralize missiles over Ukraine is both necessary and urgent as a support mechanism for Ukraine and a safeguard to the front line of NATO's borders. The possibility of Warsaw downing Russian missiles heading toward Poland through Ukraine was laid out in June in a signed Polish-Ukrainian security agreement, while Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said at the time that the matter was still under discussion. Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz explained that a decision by all of NATO's member states would be necessary to take such a step. The NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg opposed the move, insisting the alliance will not be involved in this conflict. So Poland those are actually watching every missile that flies over their heads and do not down it while they can do it safely without debris falling on their heads. There are ways and capabilities to do that, trust me on that, but they watch these missiles knowing that in a minute it will kill a child in Kharkiv or Kiev or another Ukrainian city, and no, they cannot down it as NATO fears escalations. Stoltenberg's successor, Mark Rutte, has yet to address the topic publicly. Sikorsky revisited the issue in September when he said he was in favor of shooting down Russian missiles in Poland, even warning of a potential nuclear disaster. Rutte said, and that is what Stoltenberg should have learned, actually, Poland has the legal right to down stray Russian missiles and drones that enter Polish airspace without asking Stoltenberg or NATO or Putin or the Pope or anyone at all for that matters.
Russia can no longer dictate to us how we defend our own country. We have both a constitution and are recognized in international law to defend our airspace. Radosław Sikorsky, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland.
He warned that a Russian missile could hit a Ukrainian nuclear power plant, for example in Zaporizhia. The reference is obvious and clear: Chernobyl disaster of 1986 that leaked radiation across Ukraine and Belarus. A similar nuclear disaster could also impact Poland. I think we should help Ukraine to protect its nuclear power plants against such stray Russian missiles, Sikorsky said. You know, to fear escalation amidst a war that you did not start is the most brutal, cowardly, stupid, and perverted lie I've ever heard of. Paradoxically, in the end, it will be exactly these lies that eventually will force NATO to step into the battlefields of this criminal Russian war of aggression against Ukraine that Stoltenberg timidly calls a conflict. As while NATO fears escalation and fails to find unity in an obvious necessity to stand for values it proclaims so loudly, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is the one who escalates. He doesn't care. He needs no unity. He is a dictator. He just escalates like that. And West accepts it today, literally allowing Putin to escalate even more tomorrow. West not only does nothing about it, it is not allowing others to defend themselves, like Poland in this case. And even moreover, West is selling components to these very Russian missiles that fly over Poland to kill us in Ukraine every single goddamn day. NATO is timidly watching Russian missiles with their components inside and helps Putin kill people in Ukraine. Simple as that. That is a fact. And when Stoltenberg or Olaf Schultz or anyone talks about fears of escalation, remember one thing: the easiest way to avoid an escalation in a war is to lose it. Let us all hope that Mark Rutte understands that. Serhiy Sumlenny, Eastern Europe politics expert, founder of the European Resilience Initiative Center. Hello, Serhiy.
Hello, and thank you for having invited me today.
Pleasure is all mine. You, as a Ukrainian-German political scientist, tell me, please, Olaf Scholz is really genuinely afraid of, that's a nice talk off, huh? Genuinely afraid of escalation, or there is maybe a hidden political reason for his timidity, let's put it that way.
Well, I would pay a lot of money to understand what is going on in Olaf Scholz's mind. Right. But what we can see, there is nothing good which is going on there. We see a deep crisis within the Social Democratic Party, which Scholz leads. We have seen that people who not just supported Gerhard Schröder, maybe the worst German chancellor before Scholz and after 1949, but who endorsed him as a great social democrat, they come now to the top positions within the Social Democratic Party. The new general secretary of the Social Democrats has provided Gerhard Schröder with an award for a spotless service for the social democracy, and publicly defended him as a person who just had his opinion, very legitimate from his point of view, on Russia and on Ukraine. Now we see that being asked if the participation of the North Korean troops in Russia, in the Russia-Ukrainian war, would change Germany's policy towards delivery of weapons. The press secretary of the government said not at all. And this all in a very short time, this led to an exodus of renowned and well-known social democrats from the party. Now people with their 50 years old time within the party publicly denounce their membership and say they cannot be a member of this party. And much more, in addition to this, in the region of Brandenburg, which is a region around of Berlin, the Social Democrats announced a possible alliance with Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, Union of Sarah Wagenknecht, one of two most pro-Russian parties at all in Germany, and the person who demanded as a part of the alliance with her party an agreement that any military help for Ukraine will be immediately stopped and negotiations with Moscow would start. So yes, the Social Democrats are in deep collapse. The party has betrayed Ukraine, openly betrayed Ukraine, and Chancellor Scholz not only witnesses this, but somehow is a part of this shameless development.
You say shameless development, and I clearly understand what you mean. So, what's next? You say negotiations with, let's take the worst scenario as it is already happening, has already happened. So, what's next? Negotiations with Moscow. Sarah Wagenknecht is going to negotiate with Moscow on what exactly? On how to split up Ukraine or what?
I would say, from the point of view of the dreams of Tsar Wagenknecht and others, that would be exactly like this: discussing with Moscow how to at least allow Russia to swallow a part of Ukraine. I always say that many people in Germany who are in favor of Vladimir Putin and solidarize with him do it because they see that Putin does what they are not allowed to do. They would have gladly probably split Ukraine between two empires like the Nazis and the communists have done once, but they cannot do it. So they at least get a visual, like. Sorry, I'm slaughtered now. I said, I tell you. Yeah.
That's right. You say it in German if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, they would gladly split Ukraine between two empires, Germany and Russia, as their ancestors have done 80 years before, but they're not allowed to. So they prefer to observe and obtain some sort of sick pleasure, witnessing how Russia does what they dream about but cannot do. And after all, it is not that important what are their real motives. They are endangering not only Ukraine, they're endangering the whole Europe, they're endangering Germany, my country, and their country, of course, too. The real argumentation behind that logic is that Ukraine has obviously, from their perspective, lost the war. Any fight makes no sense, and Russia will stop at some point and will not go further. And all three cornerstones of this idea, they are proven wrong, because Ukraine successfully fights against Russia with difficulties, with severe difficulties, but still fights, and also on the Russian soil in Kursk. Russia is pretty much defeatable with enough weapons which could be supplied. And Germany still has sent 0 long-range missiles and sent very limited amount of other equipment, like how many? 20 Leopard 2 tanks, 30 Leopard 2 tanks, not more. And the same is about the United States. The United States has sent 0 F-16 jets to Ukraine. The United States has sent only 1 or 2 Patriot batteries to Ukraine. It's all incomparable with the stockpile of weapons and ammunition in the US. President Zelensky has recently said the US has delivered only 10% of the equipment which has been promised and adopted by the Congress. and still 90% has still never reached Ukraine. So in this situation, of course, more weapons would make much more impact. And the last cornerstone that Russia would stop on the Dnieper River or whatever, who told you so? Vladimir Putin himself said that Russia's borders never end. And every time when Russia says that is our last achievement and we will not go further, they did it. They promised never to annex Crimea. They promised never to annex Donbass. They promised never to attack Ukraine. Now you say they promise they will never attack Poland or the Baltic countries or Germany or France. Why do you believe that this will be the case? Vladimir Putin has clearly
Absolutely.
made it understand for us. If he says he will never attack any country, this country will be the next.
Well, I don't think that they don't believe in that. They say just they don't care. I mean, they're in Germany. If Russian army would stop somewhere near Berlin, that will be making a difference, maybe or maybe not. Well,
I think if Russian army would stop somewhere near Berlin, those people, or many of them, would come to welcome Russian soldiers with
exactly,
their flags,
exactly my
as
point.
they call now for the Russian influence in Germany. Their great surprise would be when they would get arrested by the Russian soldiers, interrogated, tortured, and maybe executed, exactly as the Russians do with some Western volunteers in Donbass, as they have executed an American great Russia patriot who came to Donbass and tried to fight for Russia. And after several months of his life in Russia-occupied Donbass, he was arrested, tortured as an American spy, and executed. But unfortunately, this hour of revelation and of achieving greater knowledge will come too late for them, and all the harm would have already been done.
In the terrible scenario that we are discussing now, but tell me, is that invitation of Ukraine to NATO, do you believe this will happen after all? Is that a question? Or this is yes or no to you personally? Do you believe this is happening?
I do not believe that invitation of Ukraine to NATO will happen soon. I would love to see it, and I will be the first who will open a bottle of champagne, but I do not believe it will happen. And the reason is very simple, because there are too many countries in the alliance who are either against Ukraine or skeptical towards Ukraine. Just imagine the position of Hungary or Slovakia, which are openly anti-Ukrainian, or then think about the position of Germany, which is very skeptical, or the position of the countries who would like to trade something off, like Turkey maybe, or I don't know, like who wants to get something from the NATO. So the consensus is very hard to be achieved. What can be done? It can be done very simple bilateral agreements between Ukraine and some nations who understand the severity of the situation. The problem here is that the Russia, of course, would try to influence these decisions and say, okay, Latvia, when you send your battalion to Ukraine, you will be a part of the war, and then we will attack you. And then we'll do anything that other countries would say that this attack of Russia against Latvia would not be covered by Article 5 because it happens in relation to Latvia's actions in Ukraine, which is, of course, nonsense. There is no such clause in the treaty, but Russia will do anything that the diplomats in Berlin or in Paris or in Washington would repeat this very comfortable lie. Because, as we know, Article 5 says that the attacked country only may call for support, but the support is not guaranteed. So Russia will try to exhaust this loophole to maximum.
Well, I was about to ask last question about long-range weapon and the restriction. Is it going to be lifted? And if North Koreans that are fighting for Russian occupying army in Ukraine right now, I know this is happening. Pentagon doesn't, but I know. So if this is going to help in any way Ukraine to lift the restrictions, but obviously after all we talked about, this dark scenario that I hope will never happen, but still we're discussing it, I understand that it is almost next to impossible that the countries will allow. However, the Poland want to, Poland clearly says that it can down Russian missiles. And then NATO says, Stoltenberg said that it is impossible because that will be a NATO involvement into the war. Why Poland has to ask a question, why it needs to ask a question to Stoltenberg or NATO when actually trying to guarantee safety of our own skies.
Now, that is what made me absolute speechless. And of course, no country needs any permission to shoot down enemy hostile objects from its own sky using its own troops. That's for any country has the air defense. And with the NATO response time of 2 weeks, I think a Russian missile can get married in Poland and get kids before the Polish air defense gets permission from Washington or whatever to shoot down this missile. That is ridiculous. But regarding the long-range missiles and the limitation, I think it's a very crucial question, because the involvement of North Korean troops is very obvious. We have proofs that North Korean troops are already fighting on Russia's side. And all what we heard from Washington is that the new bans, the new limitations will not be proclaimed for Ukraine. It says nothing about the old bans and old limitations. That means that once again we are playing the same game. Washington or Berlin or NATO in general pulls red lines, which we witness are being crossed by the enemy, and we do nothing. The same happened with Biden's promise of severe consequence for Russia if Russia dares to use chemical weapons in Ukraine. We know there are more than 400 well-documented cases of Russia using chemicals in Ukraine as a warfare, in particular chlorpicrin, and it happens nothing. The same what happened with Obama's red lines in Syria. It's not about like that one administration or another administration is bad or good. It is about the general perception and general position of the West, that the West is afraid to be involved into the war, but the hostile enemy, the adversary, Russia, is who decides if you're involved in this war or not, and not your actions or inactions.
I couldn't agree more with you, Sergei. Thank you so very much for your fine speech and position and expertise, and thank you for what you've done while you've been recently in Ukraine.
Thank you so much for this invitation.
Thank you. We talk soon. Goodbye. Sergei Sumlenny was with us, Eastern Europe politics expert, founder of the European Resilience Initiative Centre. Well, that was it for tonight. It was me, Henry Keane, and Yoto English, and another attempt to bring the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Please do not be shy. Like, subscribe, and comment. Raise your voice. It matters indeed. Thank you so very much, and see you soon. Goodbye.